Welcome in or welcome back. We are here for a movie review, a movie review of the Will Smith vehicle known as Gemini Man, a script that was apparently kicked around Hollywood for the better part of 20 years until Will Smith said, "Hey, screw it, I'll do it." This was written by those credited David Benioff, Billy Ray, and Darren Limke, directed by Ang Lee, starring Will Smith, Mary Elizabeth Winstead, Benedict Wong, and Clive Owen. So what we're going to have here is we're going to have best scene, worst scene, and the Oscar goes to, which is for the best performance in the film. Then a full discussion of the film as it were, followed by a rating and recommendation based on the movie. Now I have to just right up front, I have to mea culpa. I am not sure how well this is or is not going to go, mainly because that is what this film does to you. I hate to play the victim card. You're not sure. Look, there are I won't say moments of brilliance. There are moments of much more than competence. There are shining moments of the good in this movie. And there are also, on either side of that moment of good, on that mint of good, there are catastrophe. It's just utter schlock at times. It is utter incompetence at times. But first, the best scene. The best scene of this thing was the first appearance of the young Fresh Prince. That was an action scene reminiscent of something one might have found in Captain America Winter Soldier. There were moments of action that were original-ish. There were moments of action that were actionable. There were moments of action that were something that felt new, something that felt fresh, and something that felt weighty. You felt the weight of parts of that action scene. The worst scene, and this is all spoilers. I want to get this out there right now. This is a spoilers review. The worst scene is the end of the movie with the college scene with young Fresh Prince. A person trained to be a killer from the moment of their creation, and they're just cool to go to college. Also, you're telling me that iteration of Will Smith was 18 years old. That's what you're telling me. 18 to 20. We'll pretend maybe the ivory walls of the school that they were walking around would have accepted someone with an associate's degree. Didn't look like it to me. But whatever. That was corny. It was a corny scene. I'm not sure exactly what Mary Elizabeth Winstead's character was doing there. Is she now with old Will Smith's character? Or is she just hanging around college campuses because that's what she does? Which would have been a much more interesting movie, I think. The Oscar with this thing, you just have to give it to the best performance of this movie has to go to Will Smith. I'm not sure. I'm not sure how much of that performance is noteworthy for positive reasons, but if you're going to come away from this movie speaking about anyone, it is going to be Will Smith or Clive Owen, and we'll get into that a little bit later. But the discussion around this movie, I think, almost has to begin with the question of whether or not Will Smith's character is superhuman. That is something that is never directly addressed, but the things of which he is capable are certainly beyond the realm of those things that the average action star might be asked to do. And I don't mean surviving a fireball. I mean, the ability to sharpshoot targets at a distance, moving at an extreme velocity, etc., etc., not just very well, but to be able to do this, to have this skill to the extent that it is irreplaceable, that we must rip your genes in order to have another one of you. Is that a superhuman character? Why is no one else trainable along these same lines? How is it that we know by simply cloning this individual that the clone will therefore be capable of these same heroic feats? Is it because of some superhuman element? It seems to be. That is the only real conclusion that you're able to come away from this movie with. At the same time, it's never addressed. At the same time, it's never mentioned. At the same time, it's never even hinted at. It's just, oh, well, this guy is really good at shooting stuff. It must be in his genes. I'm not exactly sure what's going on there. So that's where I think the discussion of this film has to begin. But because of that questionable status as superhuman, there are some decent action takes, which breaks down inexplicably when both of the sharpshooters have guns. Those two sons of bitches can hit anything, at any distance, at any speed, with any weapon, until they're pointing them at each other. That's a strike. That's a strike against a movie. All of the things that I am willing to sit down in one of those little dark rooms and accept, shrug my shoulders, and just roll off my back. This is what you're trying to get me to accept. The guy who is so good with guns that he has to be cloned in order that the government can still kill people at that level of proficiency. That guy against that guy but younger. And damn it, they just can't hit one another. They can hit everything else. They can hit everything else. Toss a grenade, it's no worry, I'll just shoot it back at you, etc., etc. That said, this movie is legitimately loosely enjoyable. If you were to just turn off your brain, just accept the fact that there's a couple of fresh princes on the screen, and let that simmer in your medulla oblongata, you'd be fine. There's nothing there to ruin a good time without the introduction of your critical faculties. And there's something to be said for that. There's something to be said for a movie that could amply provide background noise, I suppose, if it were not so utterly predictable. Even in the elements of this thing which should be predictable, say setting, completely unpredictable. The elements of this thing which should be unpredictable, oh my god, there's another Will Smith, very predictable. And it's very possible that in the post-Shyamalan age, M. Night Shyamalan just did that twist thing so damn good the first couple times he was up to bat, the first maybe 3 times he was up to bat, that he knocked it out of the park so far that the audience is simply looking for a home run each and every time. And when you're looking for a home run each and every time, those twists which might be a double get overlooked. Right? So maybe that's what's going on there. I'm not entirely sure. but the twists, utterly predictable. This is essentially a comic book movie without the comic book. And when I say without the comic book, I mean without the rich lore and the years of tradition and the multiple people putting their intellectual being into it. There's a few writers credited, but I mean, who cares? And really, when you're, if that was what you were expecting, was a movie that would be fulfilling on any level, that's on you, because this movie looked ridiculous. And it was. This movie looked ridiculous, and it was. This is a low... this is a low-resolution movie. Now, I know that it is supposedly shot super high def and 120 frames per second, etc., 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 etc. It's a low-resolution movie. And what I mean is, you get the idea that Will Smith is after Will Smith. Okay, but that's as deep as that idea goes. You get the idea that, oh, well, his dad, quote-unquote, is the Clive Owen character. Okay, well, that's basically as deep as that goes. You get the idea that the Mary Elizabeth Winstead character, and I don't care about the characters' names, because the movie doesn't either. The Mary Elizabeth Winstead character is sort of caught in the middle, and that's as deep as that goes. The Benedict Wong character is the perfect encapsulation of this trend in this movie. I don't know what the hell he's doing here. I don't know what he's there for. Mightn't it just be written off, instead of having to involve another character, that Will Smith has some bat cave with a plane? Mightn't that be easier to write off than having to have Benedict Wong's character, who is just in the script to be in the script? I really don't know what that guy's doing running around. It's just a low-resolution movie. There is no real second layer to anything. That said, I think this is probably a movie which will inexplicably find itself referenced in a lot of future projects, because they tried a lot of stuff. There is the 120 frames per second. There was the de-aging process. And what you're looking at... So imagine if Crouching Tiger, Hidden Dragon, another Ang Lee movie, wasn't as successful as it was. Imagine that. Imagine the movie was less than good, but it still did all of the visual things that movie did. It still did all of the genre-bending things that movie did. It would still be referenced in almost as many future projects as Crouching Tiger, Hidden Dragon was for what that movie ended up being. And I say I think, but really, deep down, I fear that this is a movie that will creep its way in to the general psyche of other movie makers. Because, like I said, if you turn off your brain and you're just sitting in the theater, there is some fun to be had. And on the base level, that's what a movie has to do. No matter what you want to pile on top of that, that movie has to entertain. And if it fails to do that, any pie-in-the-sky stuff that you're trying to build with it won't come off. So take that for what it is. And while we're speaking about that, there were moments where that CGI, that de-aging process, that Will Smith on Will Smith meta action, was awful. Was just terrible. There were moments where you get lost and all you can see is the younger Will Smith. There's moments where it's bad. And because of that, hey man, Clive Owens looks rough. I feel bad saying it, but Clive Owens looks rough. The entire time I was watching this movie, I kept waiting for them to reveal the fact that this was, in fact, an aged-up version of Clive Owens, and the young, regular Clive Owens would walk out. Didn't happen. Spoilers. Didn't happen. I was so confused. I didn't know. It took me a minute to even recognize. Am I the only one that feels this way? Maybe I'm just being too hard on old Clivey. But really, seems to be having a rough go. That said, the one thing that I really have to walk away from this movie wondering, if old Will Smith and young Will Smith at some point in this movie had got it on, would that be gay sex or masturbation? I'm open to any explanation you would like to provide. I, for the life of me, can't come to a conclusion. I have no idea what the right answer is, but I'm more than willing to be convinced either. I'm curious. And because, maybe, of the fact that that was rattling around in the back of my brain for this entire movie, this movie felt like it was 4 hours long. Felt like it was just 4 hours long. Felt like sitting through a seminar while you have to pee and you're hungry. One of those classes where you don't get to get up and leave, you know? Maybe it was a little bit rainy on the way in. You woke up late, didn't get to eat anything before class. So you gotta pee and is really hungry. That's how this entire movie felt. It just felt way longer than it really was. And here's how the movie really feels. Here's how this movie really feels. It feels like an Arnold Schwarzenegger script that Arnold turned down 4 times. Because there's something there to go with. There's a place for an Arnold type, which is obviously the actor who's portraying the older and the younger characters. That performance is necessary of someone that the audience wants to watch. And the rest of it's just... Look, we turned the camera on, didn't we? That's what the rest of it is. And that is how a lot of Arnold movies went. Arnold, down to the dialogue. You made a person out of another person? Literally a line from the film. Another line that we get thrown in there. Look, I took a lot of writing classes. I have a master's degree in creative writing. And one of the things that I would always get in trouble for when we were critiquing and workshopping someone's stuff is I would always highlight the cliches in there. And even being as dastardly as I was left to wonder if sometimes there is a place for a cliche. If there's a certain character who is so cliche that cliches are his thing, is that acceptable? But there is a cliche in this movie that is so cliche in its dialogue. I don't just mean the script stuff. I mean the actual dialogue. Someone says long time caller or long time listener, first time caller. Really? I could have gone my entire life and never heard that line in a film and been okay with it. I'd have been okay with that. Now, why does that line bother me so much? I don't know. But it did. I knew that I was seeing a Will Smith film. I knew that I was seeing a Will Smith film where Will Smith would be shooting guns at Will Smith. I knew that I was seeing a Will Smith film where Will Smith would be shooting guns at Will Smith, and it was directed by the guy who directed The Hulk. I knew all that stuff going in. Long-time listener, first-time caller still pissed me off. Maybe it's the old elitist in me. I can't tell you. But another one, there's a part where Junior, that's the younger Will Smith's name. I mean, how creative is that? Clive Owen. I keep wanting to call him Clive Barker because of how awful he looked. Clive Owen is going off on Junior, and he just in the middle of going off says, "I've seen battle." Cool. Clive? Glad for you. Was that outburst necessary? Or was it just, in the script? So much of this is just, in the script. Speaking of just in the script, Benedict Wong. I've got to come back to it. Benedict Wong's character is and look, I know he's in there to get killed and piss off Will Smith, but even then, the next scene it's just gone. We don't remember Benedict Wong. We don't want to avenge him. Will Smith's character does not want to avenge him. And I wanted to like Benedict Wong's character. I wanted to, but I couldn't. I could barely remember him. I could barely remember him while he was on the screen. It was just so little going on with him. And speaking of little going on, 8 days after release of this thing, it had made $75.5 million worldwide. And I'm not going to talk about, I'm not going to make much time in many of my reviews for money stuff. I think I'm going to box office stuff. I think I'm going to have different series for that, different videos for box office stuff. But 8 days into release, it had made $75.5 million worldwide. Domestic, $30 million. This thing had a $138 million budget. $138 million budget. When you look at marketing costs, normally they say that the production budget, you double it, and you've got the actual budget, which is the production budget plus the marketing budget. A $276 million movie, making $75.5 million worldwide over a weekend. This thing's going to be a wash for the studio. Just a massive loss of money. Just a massive, gargantuan, monumental loss of money. That is rough. That is rough. And it even, look, it has one of the archetypal story tropes for storytelling. This is man versus self. This is a perverse man versus self. But that is something so archetypal that it should be speaking to more people than this movie had got itself in front of. But let's talk about that for a little bit. Man versus self. The older man versus the younger self. One of the things that is investing yourself in a career is sacrificing the now for the later. This movie is a commentary, perhaps, on the fact that sacrificing the now for the later doesn't really pay off, because you never know when the now is going to be more valuable than the later. In this movie, it is the now, the younger version, the version which is supposed to sacrifice itself, which is sent to sacrifice the older self. Whoa. Trippy, right? So, what are we doing there? Is there an actual commentary to be made by this movie? Or is this just happenstance by the fact that I've taken too many literature classes and I saw this movie? I think it's the latter. I don't think there's any actual commentary on man versus self to be had from this movie. I think that to grant this script that credit would be farcical. Further, I really want to make the argument. Look, I'm a prick. If I could sit down and explain for 20 minutes the glorious masterpiece of literature, which is Gemini Man, if I could do that, by God, I would. By God, I would. If I could sit here and tell you that Will Smith versus Will Smith with pew-pews going on, pew, 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 If I could tell you that that was art, I'm pretentious enough to do it. I am self-involved enough to do it. I can't do it with this movie. I tried. I wanted to. I wanted to be that prick. I can't do it. I sat down literally at the library for about an hour with just man versus self scribbled onto a piece of paper, seeing if I could squeeze something out of it. So, look, the ball's in your court now. I have volleyed that over to your side. If you can make that argument in the comments section, I want you to. I defy you to be more pretentious than I am and find an application for the artistry of this movie and the man versus self paragon of literature. I would love for someone to be able to do that because I couldn't. I tried. So rating and recommendation based on the film. I'm going to give this 65 Virgos out of 100 because I can, and this is, I don't think, I was going to give this a 70 for so long, 75, no, a 70, which is barely passing, right? That's your base level C. A 70 is your base level C. That's what I wanted to do for this. I couldn't. The more I thought about it, the less I liked this movie. And a recommendation based on this movie, I can't really think of anything, though there are moments where this movie is so competent as to sort of channel flashbacks to Captain America Winter Soldier. And I would like to be able to draw parallels of Captain America waking up 80 years in the future and fighting with something that channels his youth, which is the Winter Soldier. Bucky, right? Who the hell is Bucky? You pair that with some great hand-to-hand combat, some shooty shoots, and maybe there's an argument to be had as to why Gemini Man deserves playtime on the same weekend as Captain America Winter Soldier. I'm not sure it's there. Even the faux love interest between Black Widow and Captain America in that movie versus the forced non-love interest between Will Smith and Mary Elizabeth Winstead, I can't even do anything there. Look, this movie is one of those things that was so uninspired, I think, on so many levels and so disjointed that it really sort of sucked the life out of me as I was trying to review it, as I was trying to put some type of thought onto paper and really squeeze some. Look, I spent the money to sit down and watch this movie in the theater. I did that. I can't have that back. That money, that time, I can't have that back. I've seen battle. There's no going back on that. There's no refunding that. It was all for naught. This is now man versus self. This is me chiding previous Adrian. Look, don't go see movies that put out trailers like Gemini Man, because if that's all you have to put in a trailer, there's probably not much better in the actual movie. I think that's a credible way to think about that. That if your trailer looks like the trailer to Gemini Man, you probably screwed up. So note to future Adrian, don't spend your money on that. Don't waste your time on that. This is a movie that was so utterly bereft of joy but not incompetent. Look, so there are movies so good, there are books so good, there are poems so good that they inspire you to want to pursue your art no matter what your art is. There are movies so bad, books so bad, poems so bad that they inspire you to do your art because you know what? You can do better than that. There are those movies. There are those books, there are those poems, etc., etc. And then there's this line somewhere between the two of project that was finished to finish project and is so uninspired that it reminds you that even at your best, maybe your best is just not good enough and you shouldn't try. That's where this movie is. That's what I've got. I hope to see you back for the next movie review. We've got some books we're going through on the channel as well. I'm hoping to get a little bit more vlogging done. Vlogging is something that really sort of stretches me in my editing and computer prowess. I am not a tech guy, but it helps me out if you hit that like button if you liked this. Hit the subscribe button if you're looking forward to more videos like this. And if you want to help me grow here on the channel, hitting that share button sure would help me out. Thank you.